Hi everyone, my name is Nadach Musungu and I'm the Inclusion Lead at Kantar. Kantar is delighted for the second time around to be involved in delivering the All-In Census, a project of such importance and scale with the sole purpose of driving inclusion for all across the industry. The first thing I'd like to acknowledge is the incredible response the All-In survey received. Almost 19,000 responses from across the advertising and marketing industry, spanning agencies, media owners, tech companies, and brand marketing teams. These responses equate to an investment of around £300,000 worth of industry time. The survey recorded almost 3,000 more responses than the 2021 iteration, the largest response ever for our industry. It is also the largest survey of its kind completed by any industry in the UK. I'd like to personally thank everyone who took the time to complete it and the hundreds of businesses who shared and promoted it to their workforce. At Kantar, we've developed the Inclusion Index to help organisations and industries to understand, measure and track their inclusion performance on a global scale. We do this by capturing the employee experience in the workplace, calculating company sense of belonging, absence of discrimination, and presence of negative behaviour. This gives us an inclusion score which we can use to track, benchmark our inclusion performance. Since 2021, when we first ran the All-In Census, we've seen a 2% increase in the All-In Inclusion Index score, which shows positive signs of improvement. Indeed, there is still so much for us to do. But this improvement indicates that we are moving the needle in the right direction. Now, moving on to the findings from the All-In Census. In terms of gender representation, 60% of respondents were women, 39% were men, and 1% were non-binary. Though women do outnumber men in the industry, this does suggest that there was a slight response bias towards women, though comparison 2021 and official data sources suggest the impact is negligible. In addition, 0.3% of respondents identified as transgender. Despite their overrepresentation in the overall sample, women remain underrepresented amongst C-suite respondents, though the proportion in these positions had increased from 39% in 2021 to 46% in 2023. This reflects wider gender representation by age, whereby women outnumber men from ages 16 to 44, but are outnumbered by men from age 45 and upwards. So what is happening to these women? The data shows us that many are leaving the industry in their 40s for better work-life balance, often in response to various life challenges, including caring for elderly parents and childcare responsibilities. This concern is reflected in the data, where over half of the women feel that paternal leave they've taken has negatively impacted their career progression. It is therefore unsurprising to learn that 29% of women believe that their gender is a hindrance to career progression in the industry. That's more than twice the proportion of men. Looking further into the experience of women in the workplace, we find that almost 1 in 10 have experienced sexual discrimination in the last 12 months. That's more than 4 times the equivalent figure for men. Thankfully, incidents of sexual harassment was lower. Just 1% of both men and women reported it in the last 12 months. Through the Time to Initiative, the industry has been united in its zero-tolerance approach towards sexual harassment in recent years. Nevertheless, this still represents 200 people affected in our industry in the last year, and that's still too many. The representation of ethnic minorities among All-In respondents exceeded that of the UK working population. 18% of respondents were from a minority ethnic background. Of those, 4% were Black and 8% were Asian. In comparison with other industry sources of ethnic representation, this suggests this is an accurate reflection of the wider industry, highlighting the strides made in recent years to diversify recruitment. However, there are 2 key counterpoints that remain. First, the advertising and marketing industry remains concentrated in London. In this context, the industry appears woefully underrepresented. Ethnic minorities comprise 38% of London's working population. Second, the all-in response suggests that representation dropped significantly for ethnic minorities in C-suites. Again, this reflects my wider takeout from the all-in census, is that much progress has been made, but there's still so much to do. This is also reflected when we look at the experience of ethnic minorities in our industry. Across the board, levels of discrimination, bullying, and harassment are lower in 2023 than in 2021. As highlighted in this slide, fewer people are likely to leave the industry due to the lack of inclusion or discrimination experience now than in 2021. Most notable is the decline in relation to Asian people likely to leave the industry, failing from 27% in 2021 to 21% in 2023. Whilst this shift is welcomed, those numbers are still too high. In particular, 3 in 10 Black people stated they were likely to leave the industry due to the lack of inclusion and/or discrimination. In addition, 1 in 10 people from an ethnic minority had personally experienced racial discrimination at their current company. In fact, Black and Asian respondents were more likely than any other minority group to have personally experienced discrimination at their current company, 14% and 11%. These were followed by Muslims and women as the most likely to experience discrimination, both at 9%. However, these levels of discrimination are significantly lower than 2021. In particular, the level reported by Black people and Muslims has decreased dramatically. These changes reflect a broader trend across 2023 results for lower levels of discrimination, bullying, and harassment. Undoubtedly, this is good news and certainly worth acknowledging before doubling down efforts to eradicate these behaviours from the workplace. The Equality Act 2010 defines disability as a physical or mental impairment that has a substantial and long-term adverse effect on an individual's ability to carry out normal day-to-day activities. 11% of respondents and 8% of C-suite respondents to the all-in census are disabled based on this definition. Both of these figures are notably lower than the 14% in the UK working population, suggesting a continued need to increase access, remove barriers to both entry and progression for people with disabilities. In comparison to 2021, the experience of disabled people responding to the all-in census has improved slightly. Where employers are aware of an individual's disability, more than 3/4 of disabled people felt supported by their company, an improvement on 2021. Of course, more work is required to unpick why 1/4 of disabled people do not feel supported, but this increase indicates progress. The levels of disabled people personally experience discrimination have remained consistent since 2021 at 7%, whereas those likely to leave the industry due to the lack of inclusion and discrimination has fallen from 22% to 16%. Despite these signs of improvement, many disabled people continue to encounter barriers to progression, alienation, and demeaning behaviour. Work must continue not only to increase representation of disabled people working in the industry, but also to ensure that their experience is a positive one. Just 19% of the workforce are from a working class background compared to 40% of the UK population. 1 in 5 people in the industry attended a fee-paying school, significantly more than the 8% represented in the general population. These findings make it clear that if we want our industry to accurately reflect the consumers we want to attract and the society we all live in, more must be done to access talent from a variety of social economic backgrounds. The proportion identifying as LGB+ in the survey was significantly higher than the UK average. Although there is some work needed to improve representation at C-suite, overall, the experience of LGB plus in the industry is largely positive, or at least equivalent to the industry average. However, LGB plus respondents were more likely to leave their company in the next 12 months. The reasons for these are yet unclear, though we hope to learn more as we unpick the data. The industry's age profile skews heavily towards 25 and 34 and 35 to 44 age brackets, with nearly 3/4 of the sample represented here. This compares with just under half of the UK working population. Generally, the younger age groups are more diverse and inclusive, and as age increases, so does the prevalence of people identifying as white, male, and heterosexual. However, 12% of the respondents in the 55 to 64 age brackets have felt personally discriminated against due to their age. That's more than double the industry's average. A third of respondents were affected by stress or anxiety. For 14%, that stress and anxiety was primarily work-related. Work-related stress was notably higher than average for disabled and LGB colleagues, as well as those with caring responsibilities. This highlights the importance for companies to do better to understand the key stresses for people in these groups and the infrastructure required to better support them. Though it may not be directly work-related, it is also important to reflect on those suffering from stress and anxiety in general. The issue is impacting a significant proportion of our colleagues, so awareness is key. We can clearly see that with different groups within the sample, they experience even higher levels of stress and anxiety. Given the younger age profile of the industry, it's particularly concerning to see how high levels of stress and anxiety are among this group. For the first time in 2023, questions relating to the menopause and the workplace were included. The objective was to better understand how menopause is perceived at work alongside the extent to which companies have defined a policy or approach to it. A quarter of respondents stated that their company did have a designated menopause policy in place. However, 64% of respondents didn't know if their company had a policy or not. It is therefore perhaps unsurprising that 56% of respondents felt that their company would benefit from menopause awareness training. The data suggests that awareness training could be indeed beneficial, as 1 in 4 women would not feel comfortable approaching their manager about menopausal symptoms. Also new to 2023, one of the hottest and potentially most contentious topics currently circulating in the industry is hybrid working. The pandemic has fundamentally changed how we work, when we work, and where we work. Working 5 days a week in the office, a simple fact of life for the majority of us just a few years ago, now seems incomprehensible for many. In all likelihood, hybrid working is here to stay. But what is the correct balance? According to the all-in respondents, the balance is currently about right. The average number of days spent in the office for full-time employees was 2.2 days. The number that respondents would ideally like to spend in the office was about 1.9 days, so slightly less than the current reality. The benefits are many, there's no doubt, not least an improved work-life balance for all and the increased opportunities afforded to those with accessibility issues or caring responsibilities. But what have we lost in turn? Productivity, mental health, learning opportunities, and team cohesion have all been flagged with concern. 1 in 5 respondents were likely to leave their company in the next 12 months. The overwhelming reason for most people leaving was for better opportunities, salary elsewhere, relevant to the 71% of potential leavers. This was followed by poor work-life balance and changing career. Those aged 18 to 34 were considered more likely to leave than those aged over 35, as were disabled, LGB+, Black and Muslim respondents. Though a lack of inclusion and discrimination was not necessarily cited as the reason for leaving, The higher number amongst these groups suggests that the barriers and negative experience often reported by these groups were likely to be at least a contributory factor. Given the current talent shortage faced by the industry, the loss of such talent should not be written off as merely collateral or churn. More must be done and is being done to attract diverse talent, and perhaps more importantly, to ensure that once they arrive, all people, regardless of background, feel welcome to stay. There are so many positives to take from the 2023 data. There's areas of improvement highlighted, and there's change happening in real time. However, there is still so much work to be done. As in 2021, these results will directly shape the evolving industry action plan. There's plenty for us to digest and reflect upon here, and that's just the start. Analysis will continue over the coming weeks and months to ensure that every story in this data is revealed. Please visit the All-In Hub for all the latest All-In data and developments. I hope you enjoy the rest of today's agenda, which will unpick some of the findings and discuss what collective industry action should look like. Thank you.